My husband always introduced me as Shannon. His lovely wife who dabbles in event planning. He never said, "This is Shannon, the CEO of Apex Hospitality Group, a multi-million-dollar empire she built from scratch." That little omission, that constant diminishment of my success, was the crack in our marriage. But when he uninvited me from his own brother's wedding while keeping my $40,000 gift, that crack became a canyon, and he was about to fall in. This is a story about what happens when you push a good person too far. If you believe in getting what you deserve, hit that subscribe button, because you won't want to miss how this ends. My husband, Mark, has a particular way of introducing me at the endless string of corporate dinners and holiday parties we attend. Just last month, at a fundraiser for the Scottsdale Arts Council, he did it again. He had his heavy, proprietary hand on the small of my back, his thumb rubbing little circles into the silk of my dress. He was talking to a city councilman, his voice booming with easy confidence. When the councilman's eyes flicked to me, Mark beamed his brilliant white smile and said, "And this is my lovely wife, Shannon. She dabbles in event planning." I felt the familiar clench in my jaw, the carefully practiced smile I had to pin to my own face. He said it with such paternal pride, as if dabbles were a charming little hobby he indulged me in, like collecting porcelain dolls or tending to a small herb garden. He never, ever says, "This is Shannon Sterling, the founder and CEO of Apex Hospitality Group, a multi-million-dollar empire she built from a single, rundown motel into the Southwest's leading name in luxury experiences." That truth, my truth, is too big for the small box he's built for me in his world. That constant, gentle sanding down of my life's work into a quaint pastime used to be a dull ache in my chest. Now, I see it for what it was, the very foundation of our entire 15-year marriage. I'm in my office now, the one on the top floor of the Apex Tower. The building itself is a sharp, modern statement of glass and steel rising from the desert floor. My office is my sanctuary. The air is cool and silent, filtered and controlled. A stark contrast to the wild, rugged beauty of the McDowell Mountains visible through the floor-to-ceiling window behind me. On my polished mahogany desk, a single document lies open, the quarterly profit and loss report. The paper is thick, creamy, its weight a satisfying presence under my fingertips. I scan the columns of black ink, the numbers telling a story of success. My eyes catch on the names, my creations, my children in a way. Saguaro Summit Estates. Wedding bookings up 18% year-over-year. Red Rock Catering, expanding into corporate contracts with a 30% profit margin. The Oasis Valley Resort, guest satisfaction scores at an all-time high of 98%. A flicker of pride, sharp and fierce, cuts through the cold numbness I've been feeling all afternoon. This is what I do. I don't dabble. I build empires. It all really started. Or maybe I should say it all came to a head 3 weeks ago, at a Sunday family dinner. My mother-in-law's house is a time capsule from the late 90s. Honey oak cabinets, floral wallpaper, and the faint, lingering scent of potpourri and furniture polish. The air was thick with the comforting aroma of her famous roasted chicken and garlic. The low hum of conversation was a familiar rhythm, punctuated by the clinking of silverware against her best china. It was the perfect picture of domestic harmony. But I've always been able to feel the subtle tension humming just beneath the surface in that house. The unspoken rules of a hierarchy I never quite fit into. My brother-in-law, David, a younger, softer version of Mark, cleared his throat and tapped his fork nervously against his wine glass. He was beaming, his arm wrapped so tightly around his fiancée, Emily, that she looked both thrilled and slightly breathless. Ooh, we have an announcement," David said, his voice ringing with a joy so pure it momentarily silenced the room. "We've set a date. We're getting married in October." A chorus of congratulations erupted. My mother-in-law was instantly teary-eyed. Mark clapped his brother on the back with a resounding thud. A wide, genuine grin splitting his face. I smiled, feeling a real warmth spread through my chest for them. They were good kids, deeply in love, saddled with student loans and a mortgage on a starter home that ate up most of their income. Later, as the dinner plates were cleared and the family scattered, the celebratory mood began to fray at the edges. I watched David and Emily huddled close on the floral sofa, their voices low and strained. Emily was picking at a loose thread on a cushion, her brow furrowed. David had a hand on her knee, trying to be reassuring, but the slump in his own shoulders betrayed his anxiety. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but their worry was a palpable thing in the room. "We could just do it at the courthouse. Honey. A party later. Maybe," David murmured. "My dad would be so disappointed," Emily whispered back, her voice thick. "And a wedding at Applebee's for the reception. It just sounds so sad. The church hall is an option. But with those fluorescent lights and folding chairs, we might as well use paper plates." My heart constricted. Listening to them trying to piece together a wedding day from scraps was painful. They deserved a beautiful memory, a day that felt magical, not a constant reminder of their financial limitations. They deserved to start their life together with joy, not with the crushing weight of compromise. I found my sister-in-law, Jessica, by the dessert table, where she was meticulously arranging slices of pecan pie onto plates. She always played the part of the perfect, dutiful daughter. I touched her arm gently to get her attention. "Hey, Jess, can I talk to you for a second? In the hallway?" She looked up, a little surprised, but followed me out of the dining room. I kept my voice low, not wanting anyone to overhear. I heard David and Emily. I began softly. "It breaks my heart. I want to help. I want to pay for the wedding." Jessica's perfectly plucked eyebrows shot up. "Shannon. No. You can't. That's tens of thousands of dollars. Dad would have a fit if he knew." "Then he doesn't have to know," I said, meeting her gaze directly. "It's not a loan. It's a gift. My gift to them. Let them have the day they're dreaming of. A real wedding. 40,000 should be more than enough for a beautiful venue. Great food. Flowers. Everything. But it has to stay between us. You can just tell them it's a general family contribution. That everyone chipped in. I don't want them to feel like they owe me anything. Ever. This is about them. Not me." Tears instantly welled in Jessica's eyes, and for a moment, I thought my cynical heart had misjudged her. She threw her arms around me, her hug surprisingly fierce. "Oh, Shannon, you have such a good heart. Thank you. I promise you, we will never, ever forget this." Her words felt warm and genuine. A comforting reassurance. They echo differently now, rattling in my memory like loose change in a tin can. And for 3 weeks, that's exactly what I thought it was. A gift. A simple, heartfelt gesture to the family I had married into. A secret I was happy to keep. until my phone rang this afternoon. The light outside my window had softened to a golden orange, painting long shadows across my desk. The day was winding down. The caller ID displayed a name I knew well, Desert Rose Events. Chloe, the owner, is one of the best wedding planners in Scottsdale and a preferred partner for my venues. I assumed it was a routine call about a corporate booking and answered with my usual professional greeting. Mrs. Sterling. Chloe's voice was on the line, but it sounded strained, stripped of its usual cheerful efficiency. This is she. How are you? Chloe. There was a loaded pause. I'm okay. I'm calling about the Sterling Miller wedding. I had a very unusual call from your husband, Mark, about an hour ago. My hand, which had been doodling on a notepad, went still. Okay. Chloe took a sharp breath. The sound crackling slightly over the phone. He instructed me to remove your name from the guest list. And from the seating chart, the wedding announcements, and all internal planning documents. He was very specific that you were not to attend the event. The world narrowed to the sound of her voice. The silent, air-conditioned room suddenly felt cold. The air thin. My fingers tightened on the smooth, cool surface of my phone. But, Chloe continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, as if she were confessing a crime. He also made it very clear that the $40,000 deposit you paid is to remain in place to cover all services. He said it was a gift and the arrangements should proceed as planned. Just without you. For a long moment, I said nothing. I couldn't. The betrayal was so audacious, so utterly brazen. It defied comprehension. He had cut me out, erased me from a celebration I was funding, and had the gall to keep my money. A hollow, ringing silence filled my ears. Then, through the white noise of shock, a single, sharp thought cut through. Cold and precise as a surgeon's scalpel, it wasn't a question born of emotion, but of strategy. Is the whole wedding cancelled? I asked, my own voice sounding distant and unnervingly steady. Chloe was clearly thrown. Ma'am, I'm sorry. I don't understand. You're not the bride. A strange, icy calm washed over me, displacing the shock. It was the same calm that settled over me before a high-stakes negotiation. I looked out my window at the city spread below, at the empire I had built with my own two hands. No, I said softly, letting the word hang in the air for a beat. But I own the venue. I ended the call before she could stammer out a response, placing the phone gently back in its cradle as if it were made of delicate glass. I stood up and walked to the window, resting my forehead against the cool pane. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it. The disrespect. It wasn't just an insult. It was a declaration that I was nothing more than a bank account, a resource to be used and then discarded. My phone buzzed on the desk behind me, a sharp, violent sound in the crushing quiet. I already knew who it was. I walked back, my legs feeling strangely heavy, and picked it up. The screen glowed with a new message from Mark. Don't make a scene. You're not coming to David's wedding. We're keeping the money. It was a gift. We'll talk when you've calmed down. Calm it down. The two words pulsed on the screen. A monument to his condescension. He wasn't just uninviting me, he was patting me on the head, treating my inevitable pain and anger as a childish tantrum he would deal with later. As if my feelings were an inconvenience, a mess he expected me to clean up before he had to be bothered. I stared at the message, the phone feeling unnaturally heavy in my hand. A dead weight pulling me down. The silence in my office was absolute. Outside, the Arizona sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. But I saw none of it. My world had shrunk to the glowing rectangle in my palm. My phone rang again. Its vibration, a violent tremor against the polished wood of my desk. I flinched. My first thought that it was Mark, calling to drive the knife in deeper. But the screen showed Chloe's name. I hesitated for only a second before answering. My voice flat, devoid of any inflection. Shannon. Ms. Sterling. I'm so sorry to bother you again. She began, her words tumbling out in a rush. She sounded genuinely distressed. I felt I had to call back. After you hung up, I felt something was very wrong. I told Mr. Sterling that this was highly irregular and that I would need a direct confirmation from you. The person who signed the check, he got very defensive. I waited, saying nothing, letting her fill the silence. He told me, and please, you have to know, I am only repeating this for your own information. He told me that you have a tendency towards emotional instability, that you can get overwrought, and that the stress of a big family event would be too much for you. He said the entire family had agreed that it was kinder, for everyone's sake, if you weren't there. A bitter, metallic taste filled my mouth. Emotional instability. It was his go-to weapon. The one he deployed whenever my opinions were too strong, my ambition too visible, my success too bright. He was painting me as a fragile, hysterical woman to a business associate to one of my own partners. Though he didn't know it to justify his theft and cruelty, the blood drained from my face, a cold wave washing over me, followed by a surge of heat so intense it made my ears ring. Before I could respond, my other line beeped. Caller ID showed a picture of my sister-in-law, Jessica. A wide, toothy smile on her face. Chloe. I have to take this, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Thank you for your professionalism. I clicked over. Jessica. Shannon. Honey, I'm so glad I caught you. She chirped, her voice dripping with a cloying, false sweetness. Listen. I hear you've been talking to the wedding planner. Mark told me there was a little mix-up. A mix-up? I repeated, the words tasting like ash. Yes. And honey, I just want you to know, this is for the best. We were all just thinking of you. You know how you get with all the family drama? You get so worked up. We're just trying to protect you, to let you have some peace and quiet while we handle all the stressful wedding stuff. We want David and Emily's day to be perfect and free of any conflict. My knuckles were white where I gripped the edge of my desk. She was reading from the same script as Mark, protecting me. They were wrapping their betrayal in a blanket of concern, trying to convince me it was an act of love. They weren't just excluding me, they were trying to make me thank them for it. So you all decided this together, I asked, my voice as brittle as thin ice. It was a family decision. Yes. We all love you so much. Shannon, we just want what's best for you. The lies were so effortless, so practiced. As I was about to hang up, my phone beeped again. David, the groom himself. I have to go. Jessica. I didn't wait for her to reply. I just clicked over to the next call in the gaslighting gauntlet they had arranged for me. Shannon David's voice was hesitant, laced with a cowardly guilt he was trying to hide. Hey. Jess said she was calling you. I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for what? David. For, you know, for being so understanding about this. And about the gift. Emily and I are so incredibly grateful for the gift. It's going to make our day so special. We really appreciate that you're not making a big deal out of the guest list thing. It means a lot. And there it was. The pathetic, grubby little heart of the matter. He wasn't calling to see how I was. He wasn't calling to apologize for his part in this humiliating charade. He was calling to make sure the money was still secure. To thank me for not rocking the boat that was sailing him and his fiancée toward their dream wedding on my dime. I disconnected the call without a word. For a long time, I just stood there in the silent, gathering twilight of my office. The onslaught was over. The coordinated attack was complete. I felt hollowed out, scoured clean by their casual cruelty. I began to pace, the plush carpet muffling my footsteps. Back and forth. From the window to the door. A caged animal in a gilded cage of my own making. They had me trapped. What could I do? Call them and scream? They'd just point to it as proof of my instability. Demand the money back. They'd call me petty. I say I was trying to ruin David's happiness over a bruised ego. They had built the perfect prison, and I had handed them the bricks. I didn't realize how long I'd been in my office until I finally drove home. The streetlights of Scottsdale blurring past me like forgotten stars. The house was quiet when I walked in. Our house. Aspravling. Modern Adobe-style home that I had paid for. The silence felt different tonight. It wasn't peaceful. It was empty. I heard his key in the lock a little after 9. He walked in, tossing his briefcase onto a chair, loosening his tie. He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed. As if I were a problem on his to-do list that he now had to manage. So, he said, his voice laced with exasperation, "You've been calling the wedding planner. Making a scene." I just stared at him from across the vast, open-plan living room. "You uninvited me from your brother's wedding, Mark. And you kept my $40,000. What kind of scene did you expect?" He had the audacity to scoff, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Oh. Come on. Shannon. It was a gift. You don't get to attach strings to a gift. It's not a transaction." He walked towards the kitchen, opening the fridge and pulling out a bottle of water. His back to me. Jessica and my mom were right. You always have to make everything about you. About your money. Your control. He turned to face me, taking a long drink of water. His expression, one of pure, unadulterated arrogance. And then he delivered the line, the one that changed everything. "Just because you paid for something doesn't give you control. Shannon, your success has made you arrogant. Your success." The words hung in the air between us. And suddenly, it was like a key turning in a lock deep inside my mind. My success. What was my success? It was Apex. And what was Apex? It was Saguaro Summit Estates. It was Red Rock Catering. It was the Oasis Valley Resort. The names David and Emily had excitedly chattered about during their planning calls. The names Jessica had confirmed with me when she booked everything. They weren't just random venues. They were my venues. They were the names from my profit and loss report. They hadn't just taken my money to spend at some other company. They had, in their blissful, arrogant ignorance, built their entire fantasy wedding inside my own empire. A thought, so sharp and clear and cold it took my breath away. Sliced through the hot fog of my anger. They don't know. Without another word, I turned on my heel and walked past him, my footsteps echoing on the Saltillo tile. "Where are you going?" he called after me, his voice irritated. "We're not done talking about this." I didn't answer. I went straight to my home office, shut the door, and sat down in front of my laptop. My hands were shaking, but my mind was a laser. I typed in my credentials. The secure login to the Apex Hospitality Central Management System. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I navigated to the master event calendar and typed in the search bar Sterling Miller Wedding. And there it was. All of it. En entier project file. Laid out in neat, corporate precision. Event Sterling Miller Wedding. Client contact. Jessica Sterling. Vendors. Venue Saguaro Summit Estates. An Apex signature property. Catering Red Rock Catering, a division of Apex Dining. Guest accommodations 50-room block at Oasis Valley Resort. An Apex luxury hotel. Event planning and coordination Desert Rose Events exclusive Apex partner. I leaned back in my chair. A slow, cold smile spreading across my face. The shaking in my hands stopped. The hot rage in my chest cooled, condensing into something hard and heavy and powerful. I was no longer the victim. I was no longer the hysterical wife or the convenient ATM. I was the owner. I pulled a yellow legal pad from a drawer and picked up a heavy, black fountain pen. The cap came off with a satisfying click. At the top of the page, I wrote a single heading: Project Reckoning. Then I started to make a list, my handwriting calm and precise, each step of what was to come. After I had filled a page, I put the pen down. I looked at the plan. It was perfect. It was proportionate. It was just. I picked up my phone. My movements now deliberate and certain. I scrolled through my contacts and found Chloe's number. I pressed the call button and listened to it ring. My heart beating a slow, steady, powerful rhythm. When she answered, her voice still hesitant, I didn't give her a chance to speak. "Chloe, it's Shannon Sterling again," I said, my voice low, clear, and imbued with an authority she had never heard from me before. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am the CEO and owner of Apex Hospitality Group." There was a long, ringing silence on the other end of the line. I could picture Chloe in her impeccably organized office, surrounded by color-coded binders and timelines. Her perfect composure finally cracking. I heard a faint shuffling of papers, then a sharp intake of breath. "Ms. Sterling, the Apex Hospitality Group," she asked, her voice a mixture of awe and dawning horror. "The one and only," I confirmed, my own voice calm, the fury inside me having cooled and hardened into something more useful purpose. "You, Chloe, as an exclusive partner, work for me. Saguaro Summit Estates is one of my properties. Red Rock Catering is my culinary division. Oasis Valley Resort is my flagship hotel in this region. The wedding my husband and his family are planning is, from a business perspective, being held entirely within my own company." Another beat of stunned silence. I let it stretch, giving her time to process the sheer, calamitous irony of the situation. "Oh my God," she finally whispered. It wasn't a curse, but a prayer. "Now," I continued, my tone shifting from informative to commanding, the voice I used in boardrooms to close 9-figure deals. "This is what is going to happen. You are to cancel every single contract and reservation associated with the Sterling Miller wedding, effective immediately. When they ask for a reason, you will cite a non-negotiable breach of good faith on the part of the client contact. You will offer no further explanation. The $40,000 deposit will be held in escrow pending a review. Do you understand? I heard a decisive click. Probably the sound of her pen snapping to attention. The professional in her took over. Yes. Ms. Sterling. Right away. Breach of good faith. Understood. Thank you. Chloe. I appreciate your discretion. I ended the call. For a moment, I just sat there in my home office. The legal pad with my plan laid out before me. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out into the dark, manicured backyard. The pool lights cast a serene blue glow on the water. It was a beautiful, peaceful scene, a life I had built, a life they thought they could just take pieces of at their leisure. I felt a profound sense of clarity. This wasn't just about a wedding invitation anymore. It was about 15 years of being minimized, of being patted on the head while I signed the checks that funded their lifestyles. It was about reclaiming the respect I had earned but never been given. I returned to my desk, opened my laptop, and brought up the Apex management portal again. I navigated to the automated vendor communications suite. With a few clicks, I drafted the cancellation notices. Oficial. Impersonal. Final. I linked them to the Sterling Miller event file. And with a single, satisfying click on the execute button, I released the Kraken. I imagined the digital signals flying out from my server, hitting the inboxes at Saguaro Summit, at Red Rock, at the Oasis Valley, à Digital Guillotine. Falling silently and swiftly, the first domino had been pushed. I didn't have to wait long. Not even 30 minutes. My phone, which I had placed face up on the desk, lit up with Jessica's name. I let it ring, listening to the cheerful, upbeat tone I had assigned to her contact years ago. It rang 4 times. Then went to voicemail. 10 seconds later, it started ringing again. She was frantic. I answered on the second ring, saying nothing. Shannon, her voice was a shrill, panicked shriek, completely stripped of its earlier /plus day syrupy sweetness. What did you do? Saguaro Summit just sent me an email, a horrible, formal email saying the booking is cancelled. They won't even give me a reason. They said something about a breach of faith. What does that even mean? I remained silent, letting her hysteria fill the space between us. I could hear her ragged breathing, the sound of pure, undiluted panic. Did you say something to them? She demanded. You have to call them back. You have to fix this. David and Emily will be devastated. I held the phone slightly away from my ear, waiting. When she finally paused for breath, I spoke, my voice low and even. I have no idea what you're talking about, Jessica. And I hung up. My fingers were resting on the phone when it lit up again. Almost instantly. This time, it was David. The poor, spineless groom. I answered. Shannon. His voice was thin, trembling. The caterer just pulled out. Red Rock Catering. They sent the same email. And I just called the Oasis Valley to confirm the block of rooms for our out-of-town guests, and they're gone. The reservations are just gone. It's like our entire wedding is vanishing. Is someone sabotaging us? A slow, cold smile touched my lips. That's a very interesting theory. David, I said, and disconnected the call. The final piece of the triptych was Mark. His message came not as a call, but as a text, which was so typical of him. It was a coward's weapon. The message was in all caps. A digital scream of impotent rage. Fix this. Now. I don't know what kind of emotional fit you're throwing, but you are going to call them and fix this. You are ruining my brother's wedding. I read the message once, then twice. My brother's wedding, not our family's wedding. The possessiveness was so telling. I placed the phone back on the desk. Screen down. I would not reply. The next move was mine to make. On my own time. I spent the next few hours in a state of suspended animation. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea. The warm ceramic mug, a comforting weight in my hands. I sat in the living room, the house silent and dark around me. And I let them stew. I imagined the frantic, circular phone calls happening between them, the accusations, the confusion, the dawning horror as they realized that every major vendor in the Scottsdale luxury event space was suddenly, inexplicably, unavailable to them. They were trapped on an island of their own making, and I had just pulled the plug on the ferry service. The silence was my power. Their panic was the interest payment on the debt of respect they owed me. Around midnight, when I knew their desperation would be at its peak, I decided it was time. I went back to my office, my movements calm and deliberate. I sat down and composed a new email. Not from my personal account, but from my official one, the one with my signature block, Shannon Sterling, Chief Executive Officer, Apex Hospitality Group. The subject line was cold and corporate urgent meeting regarding the Sterling Miller event contracts. I sent it to Mark, Jessica, David, and Emily. The body of the email was brief. Be at my office, Apex Tower, 44th floor, 10 a.m. tomorrow. All of you. Do not be late. The next morning, I was in the main boardroom a half an hour early. It was my favorite room in the entire building. One wall was a solid sheet of glass with a panoramic view of the city. The other walls were dark, polished mahogany. In the center was a massive, 20-foot-long table. A single slab of black marble so highly polished it looked like a frozen lake. 24 empty leather chairs were arranged around it. The room smelled of power, of money, of decisions that shaped the landscape of this entire city. I sat at the head of the table, the chair that was rightfully mine, and I waited. They arrived at 10 o'clock on the dot, ushered in by my executive assistant. They looked small and utterly out of place. Mark was trying to project an air of righteous anger, his jaw set. But the fear in his eyes betrayed him. Jessica looked pale and drawn, her usual sharp confidence completely gone. David and Emily just looked lost, like two children who had wandered into a lion's den. They hesitated at the door, intimidated by the scale and silence of the room. "Come in," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "Sit down." They shuffled to the chairs at the far end of the table, clustering together for safety. I remained silent, letting the tension build, letting the sheer weight of the room press down on them. Mark finally broke. "Okay. Shannon. What is this?" he demanded, trying to sound authoritative. "This little power trip of yours has gone on long enough. You made your point. Now call your friends at these places and fix what you broke." I didn't answer him. I didn't even look at him. I simply picked up a small remote from the table in front of me and pointed it at the wall behind me. A hidden projector screen descended silently from the ceiling. I clicked the remote again. The projector hummed to life, casting a bright rectangle of light onto the screen. Then, I clicked one more time. An image appeared. It was a corporate organizational chart. At the very top, in a large, bold font inside a sleek, modern logo were the words Apex Hospitality Group. And branching down from it, in smaller boxes, they were the logos they knew so well. The elegant script of Saguaro Summit Estates. The rustic, stylized bull horns of Red Rock Catering. The serene palm tree of Oasis Valley Resort. I watched their faces. I saw the exact moment the incomprehensible truth crashed into each of them. Mark's jaw went slack. His manufactured anger dissolving into pure, unadulterated shock. His face, for the first time in years, was an open book. And the story it told was one of utter disbelief. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. A small, strangled gasp escaping her lips. Her eyes darted from the screen to me and back again. The pieces clicking into place with horrifying speed. David physically recoiled, sinking back into his chair as if he'd been punched. He closed his eyes, his face a mask of shame. Emily just stared, her eyes wide and blank, unable to process what she was seeing. The silence that followed was the most profound I have ever experienced. It was the sound of an entire worldview shattering. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I looked down the long, polished length of the table, meeting each of their gazes in turn. My voice, when I finally spoke, was quiet, but it carried the weight of 15 years of silent resentment and newfound power. You wanted my money, I said softly, but you didn't want me. Now, you have neither. I let the words land, letting them feel the full, crushing weight of their mistake. Then, I leaned forward slightly. However, I am prepared to offer you a solution. For a price? My words fell into the cavernous silence of the boardroom, each one a stone dropped into a deep, still well. For a price, I watched the four of them at the far end of the table. 4 figures frozen in a tableau of disbelief and dawning horror. The projector screen behind me, with its damning organizational chart, cast a pale, clinical light on their faces. For the first time, they weren't seeing me as Shannon, the wife, the sister-in-law, the accommodating family member. They were seeing me as the name at the top of that chart. Mark was the first to find his voice, though it was a choked, strangled version of his usual confident baritone. A price? What are you talking about? This is a family matter. You can't. His words trailed off as he looked from my impassive face to the screen and back again. He couldn't finish the sentence because he finally understood. This was no longer a family matter. It was a business negotiation. And he had come to the table with no assets and no leverage. I folded my hands on the cool, black marble of the table. Oh, but I can, I said, my voice calm and measured. The voice of a CEO outlining the terms of a hostile takeover. You came into my establishments. You contracted my services. You used my resources. And then you attempted to remove me from the equation. That is a breach of contract, a breach of faith, and a profound personal insult. So, yes, there is a price. I let that hang in the air for a moment before I began to lay out the terms. First, the original $40,000. That will be wired back to my personal account by the end of the business day. Not as a refund. As a restitution. I saw Emily flinch, her hand flying to David's arm. The money was already gone. Of course, spent on deposits for flowers, a dress, 100 other things from vendors outside my empire. That was their problem now. Second, I continued, my gaze unwavering. You will pay an additional $35,000. We will call it a reorganization and emotional distresses fee. It will cover the considerable inconvenience of unwinding and then rebooking services at such short notice. And it will serve as compensation for the coordinated, malicious attempt to gaslight me. That brings your total to $75,000. That, too, will be wired to my account before any services are reinstated. Jessica made a small, wounded sound. We don't have that kind of money. Shannon, you know that. That is not my concern. I said, my voice like ice. Pool your resources. Take out a loan. Sell something. You have until 5 p.m. tomorrow. If the funds are not in my account, the cancellations will be made permanent. And I will instruct my legal team to file a civil suit for damages. I saw the flicker of defiance in Mark's eyes. The last dying ember of his arrogance. You wouldn't. Try me. I replied without blinking. I let them absorb the financial blow before moving on to the part that I knew would cut deeper than any dollar amount. Third, I require a formal, handwritten letter of apology from each of you. I looked directly at Mark, then Jessica, then David, then Emily. Each letter will be no fewer than 500 words. It will detail, in your own words, your specific role in this deception. It will acknowledge the disrespect, the manipulation, and the profound lack of judgment you each displayed. I want to know that you understand what you did. Those letters will be delivered to my assistant by the same deadline. Finally, I turned my gaze to David. And fourth, David, at the wedding reception, during your speech, you will make a public acknowledgement and apology. You will thank me not just for my financial contribution, but for teaching your family a valuable lesson in dignity and respect. You will make it clear to all of our friends and family that your family was in the wrong. The room was silent again. The weight of my terms pressing down on them, suffocating them. It was David who broke. He slumped in his chair, covering his face with his hands. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with a shame that was, to my surprise, completely genuine. Okay, he whispered, his voice cracking. Okay, Shannon, we'll do it. All of it. Like hell we will, Mark exploded, slamming his hand on the table. The sound cracked through the quiet room like a gunshot. This is insane, it's blackmail. David looked at his brother, his expression weary. All the fight gone out of him. Just stop. Mark, he said, his voice quiet but firm. Yes, stop. She's right. We were wrong. All of us. It's over. The wedding, when it happened 2 weeks later, was a shadow of the grand affair they had planned. With their budget decimated, they couldn't afford Saguaro Summit. Instead, I reinstated their bookings at a much smaller, more modest venue I owned in the foothills. A place called Canyon View Lodge. It was pretty, with a lovely view of the city lights. But it was not the spectacular, jaw-dropping backdrop they had dreamed of. The guest list was slashed from 200 to 40 of their closest family and friends. The atmosphere was subdued, thick with an unspoken tension that no amount of champagne could dissipate. I attended. Of course. I wore a charcoal gray dress, elegant and understated. I was not a guest of honor. I was an observer. A silent creditor watching a debt being paid. I spoke politely to those who approached me, accepted their condolences on the family drama I was sure they had heard whispers of, and offered a serene, enigmatic smile. When the time came for the speeches, David stood up, his hand trembling as he held his notes. Emily stood beside him, her hand on his back. He looked out at the small crowd, his eyes finding mine for a brief, agonizing moment. And then he began to speak. He thanked his guests. He spoke of his love for Emily. And then he took a deep, shuddering breath. I also need to acknowledge someone else here tonight, he said, his voice gaining a small measure of strength. My sister-in-law, Shannon. A murmur went through the room. Emily and I dreamed of a beautiful wedding. And when we couldn't afford it, Shannon stepped in with a generosity that we did not deserve. And we, my family and I, we repaid that generosity with arrogance and a profound lack of respect. We made a serious mistake. And in doing so, we almost lost everything. Shannon has taught us a very hard, very expensive, but very necessary lesson about dignity, integrity, and what it truly means to be family. We are sorry, and we are grateful. Thank you, Shannon. He raised his glass to me. A few people clapped uncertainly. I simply met his gaze from across the room and gave a slow, single nod. The debt was paid. The next morning, I was in the bedroom I had once shared with Mark, packing the last of my things into a suitcase. The house was quiet. I had spent the night in a guest room. I was folding a cashmere sweater when I heard the front door open and close. I knew it was him. He appeared in the doorway of the bedroom, looking haggard and lost. The arrogant mask he wore so well had crumbled, leaving behind a man I barely recognized. Shannon, he said, his voice hoarse. Honey, what are you doing? I'm leaving. Mark. I didn't look at him. Just continued my methodical packing. He rushed into the room, grabbing my arm. No. No. You can't. Listen. I am Zoe. So sorry. I was an idiot. I was an arrogant fool. I was jealous of you. Okay, I admit it. Your success, it just made me feel so small sometimes. But I can change. We can fix this. Please. 15 years. Don't throw away 15 years. Tears were streaming down his face. But I felt nothing. It was like watching a scene in a movie. The emotions were happening on a screen, far away from me. I gently removed his hand from my arm and turned to face him, my expression calm. I gestured to the open suitcases on the bed, and then to the packed boxes stacked neatly by the door. I'm not throwing away 15 years. Mark, I said, my voice quiet but clear. I'm finally cashing them in. For 15 years. I built an empire while you quietly built resentment. I supported your career. I funded our life. I gave you everything. And in return, you treated me like a competitor in your own home. You didn't see me as your partner. You saw me as a resource. A convenient, useful resource that was becoming too powerful and needed to be put back in its place. We're done. I zipped the final suitcase shut. I walked past him, out of the bedroom and towards the front door, pulling my luggage behind me. He followed me, still pleading. But his words were just noise now. I opened the front door. The bright, clean morning sunlight flooded the entryway. I stepped out into it, took a deep breath of the dry desert air, and didn't look back. I got into my car. It started the engine. And as I pulled out of the driveway, I saw our house, his house, now shrink in my rearview mirror until it was gone. A profound, bone-deep sense of relief washed over me. It wasn't the thrill of victory. It was the quiet, peaceful, liberating feeling of being free. 3 months later, I was sitting in that same boardroom, at the head of that same black marble table, but this time, it was filled with my executive team. We were finalizing the plans for Apex's expansion to the East Coast. I was decisive. I was focused. I was happy. My life was finally my own, a company of which I was the sole shareholder. I heard, through a mutual acquaintance, that David and Emily had used what little was left of their wedding gift money to start a small scholarship fund at the local community college for students studying business ethics. It was a small gesture, but it was a start. I never spoke to Mark or Jessica again. The letters of apology they had written were sitting in a file in my office, unread. They weren't for me. Anyway, they were for them. They thought my power was in my money, in the checks I could write. They were wrong. I learned that true power isn't about having the resources to rescue people from their mistakes. It's about having the strength to let them live with the consequences. It's the quiet confidence of knowing your own worth, even when the people closest to you refuse to see it. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is just drive away.